Family and friends are worried when a young father goes missing right before Christmas.
He could have been anywhere.
This is not like him.
That's not like him not to text.
Christmas had come and gone, and nobody had heard from him.
The search feels endless.
They posted on social media and organized a search. Me and my sister and everybody was looking for him.
She believes that there's foul play involved.
Or had he disappeared by choice?
In the past, he's bounced from house to house.
She might have even thought he left town.
Until their worst fears are confirmed.
I could see his foot sticking out, and I knew.
His body was by the creek for 2 weeks.
As the investigation unfolds, secrets surface.
There's domestic violence and infidelity.
I should have just stayed away from him, man.
It really just leads down a rabbit hole of trying to find the truth about what happened.
But the truth always comes to light.
The witness was terrified, violent.
She says she knows what happened.
She dropped a bomb on us in the rental car.
December 22nd, 2021. It's 3 days before Christmas in Columbia, South Carolina, the Palmetto State's capital.
Columbia is unique in that it's the second largest city in South Carolina, but it also has a really hometown feel. People choose to live here because it's really family-oriented. During the holidays, with people coming in town to visit family, it's just a very busy and exciting time.
But while most of the city is focused on the holidays ahead, 29-year-old Taylor Wardlaw is calling Columbia police to report her boyfriend, Terrell Sims, missing.
Terrell Sims.
She had not talked to Terrell in 2 days.
Taylor said she hadn't seen Terrell since early Monday morning. He had gotten home late, but then turned right around and left again.
He said that he had to go to a friend's house to go get his phone charger.
She says that at first, she wasn't too worried.
He plays by his own rules, you know, but this is not like him.
For the most part, he would be back home within a day or so.
But this time is different.
He is not answering his phone. He's not responding to messages. It's not like him to just ignore her calls or go without seeing his kids.
He was a really dedicated father. He was excited about his children.
She's convinced that something is wrong.
"26-year-old Terrell Sims could always bring a smile to those around him.
Terrell was fun. He liked to make people laugh. He always knew how to make you feel good.
He was considered the class clown.
His personality was infectious. He was someone that was always seen with a smile on his face.
But his life wasn't always easy.
He has a twin sister, and when they were infants, their mother passed away. And then when they were 4, their father died. As a result, Terrell and his sister were raised by their aunt along with their other siblings. She took all 4 of us in because she wanted to keep us together.
As a teenager, he fell in love and became a father.
They had a son when they were in high school.
He loved being a father.
While he loved his little boy, the relationship with the boy's mother didn't last.
It just wasn't meant to be.
So Terrell devoted more of his time to his first love, music.
Music was something that he loved to do.
He spent a lot of time listening to music, learning, and he seemed to be way ahead of his years with regards to his knowledge of music.
He used to rap, and I used to try to rap with him, and he said, "No, sis, that's not for you."
He dreamed of something bigger, something more. He believed rapping was his way out of his current circumstances.
Eventually, Terrell found his own place and continued to work hard on his dreams.
He moved into the colonies, a really large apartment complex here in the Columbia area, filled with young people who were trying to get their start.
He supported himself with fast food jobs and making sure that he can support his passion, which is his music.
While at the Colony Apartments, the aspiring rapper had no trouble attracting the ladies.
The women be like throwing themselves at him, calling him handsome.
That personality, coupled with his talent for music, really, really set him up to be a ladies' man.
And over the years, Terrell had 2 more children, both daughters.
He took very good care of his kids. Take them to the park, watch movies with them. He always made sure he got them gifts to give them money and things like that.
One of the reasons that Terrell was so excited about fatherhood is because he himself had been robbed of parents.
It made him want to be a better father.
But as great as his relationship was with his kids, he never remained in a committed relationship.
He had no interest in settling down with any one woman.
He loves all women. That's just was my brother's personality.
But that all changed when he met Taylor Wardlaw in 2018.
Terrell meets Taylor at the Colony apartment complex, and they instantly connect.
She was from the Bronx, so she had a different swagger to her. It excited him.
She's a single mom. She's all about family. It wasn't long before they became an item.
She was happy and she was always laughing.
Taylor really turned things around for him. He felt like he had found the person that he wanted to spend the rest of his life with.
And before long, in 2020, they got the great news that they were going to welcome a new child together.
They were both bursting with excitement.
He was over the moon. He was looking forward to the fact that he was going to have another boy.
When their son arrived, the young family worked harder than ever to make ends meet.
They were committed to making their family work. She would work during the day, and then he would provide his support as dad and work at night.
And by 2021, they had saved up enough money to move into a modest rental home and out of the colonies.
They were headed in the right direction. Everything was looking up.
But now, just 3 days before Christmas, Terrell has gone missing.
I really think something is wrong.
We have our officer meet with her directly to take that missing persons report.
And when he gets there, Taylor says there may be a way to find him.
According to Taylor, he had just recently got out of jail.
And he is still wearing his court-ordered ankle monitor.
At the end of 2021, Terrell Sims and Taylor Wardlaw appeared well on their way to building a family and a future together.
He had 3 kids, she had 1 child, and together they made their family work.
They also shared a 1-year-old son together, and they had recently moved into a new house.
But now, after reporting Terrell missing, Taylor is meeting with an officer from the Columbia Police Department.
Taylor let him know that Terrell came home Monday and mentioned that he left his phone charger at his friend Jordan's house.
He left, and I haven't seen him since.
She says Terrell isn't answering his phone, and she doesn't know where he is.
That's not like him not to text or call.
Or is it just Taylor that he's giving the silent treatment?
She's afraid that he might have left her for someone else.
Taylor explains that while she loves Terrell, they had a very challenging relationship.
It was nothing major, just couple stuff. And
But in the summer of 2020, things escalated.
Shortly before the birth of their son, Terrell was arrested on domestic violence charges.
He spent almost a year in jail, and he missed the birth of his son.
And the whole thing was just a big misunderstanding.
She kept saying he didn't do it. She tried to drop the charges, but the state wouldn't let her.
He was in jail for a year.
Taylor says she stayed in contact with Terrell while he was in jail and was happy to have him home after his release in August of 2021.
She's actually the one that went and bailed him out.
But when he came home, he was still wearing his court-ordered ankle monitor.
The purpose of that monitor is to really set up a zone where they are allowed to be and not allowed to be during their release time. The exclusion zone would have included Taylor's house.
He had to stay 1,000 feet away from her at all times. If not, his ankle monitor would alert the police and that he could face being rearrested.
But they had figured out a way around the exclusion zone.
She stated that they never had any issues because her and the kids moved into the rental property while he was in jail.
Taylor never told the court that she moved and had a new address. So once Terrell got out of jail, he moved back with Taylor.
He was with her the entire time, in complete violation of his parole and probation agreement upon his release.
According to Taylor, Terrell was just happy to be home with his family and get to know his new son.
She said things were really good between them.
But early Monday morning, she and Terrell had gotten into an argument.
Where have you been?
Chill out, man. I was just at Jordan's making beats.
No, you weren't.
She got on his case asking about who he's been with and where he's been.
She was very upset that he had been out for so long. But what really bothered her was that he left almost immediately after returning home.
Terrell stormed off, and when she asked him where he was going, he said he had left his charger at his friend's house and he was going to get it.
But now Terrell isn't answering her phone calls.
The reality is most people have more than one charger. So going back out in the early morning hours to get a charger just didn't make sense.
She thought he was lying, and she's afraid that he might have left her for someone else.
She says she's worried because he hasn't checked in on the kids.
But he's never done anything like this before.
After talking to Taylor, they put out a bolo on Terrell.
With the bolo out, the case is turned over to the detective who tries to find out more about Terrell.
They pulled Terrell's police records, but they're mostly minor things.
He was kind of out in the streets when he was younger, and now that he's gotten older, he seemed like he was trying to kind of get it together.
But the arrest that landed him in jail is more serious.
The charge was stating that while Taylor was 9 months pregnant, Terrell had actually put a gun to her belly.
He threatened her and their unborn child.
Now, Terrell had denied doing this. It was a he says, she says situation. However, he was still arrested for this.
And unfortunately, with domestic violence, men are at a disadvantage when police are called. They're often seen as the aggressor. And when the cops showed up, despite both of them having conflicting reports, the police automatically believed her.
However, that's not all the detective finds inside Terrell's file.
According to police records, a few hours after Terrell went missing, his ankle monitor was removed.
The detective investigating the disappearance of Terrell Sims has learned that he's no longer wearing the ankle monitor that tracks his movements.
He'd been ordered to wear the monitor as a condition of his bail for charges of domestic violence against Taylor.
Police are looking for whether or not people are tampering with these devices.
When the ankle monitor is tampered with, it sends out alerts letting them know that something is not right.
And early on December 20th, an alert on Terrell's ankle monitor came in.
Terrell Sims's ankle monitor had been cut off. Typically when somebody's absconding from supervision, that's because they don't want us to know where they are anymore.
According to the system, Terrell was about 10 minutes northwest of Columbia when the monitor went out.
It appeared to be on Monticello Road, which is a highway leading out of town.
Soon after, the monitor lost signal.
So investigators head out to Monticello Road.
We started the investigation where the ankle monitor was cut off.
It was in a very rural area, lots of streams, rocks.
They search the area, but there is no sign of Terrell.
But they do eventually find the monitor.
Hey, I got something.
We got...
With the ankle monitor a dead end, the detective turns to Terrell's friend, Jordan.
He was the friend that Terrell was with, supposedly the night that he disappeared.
Terrell had been hanging out with him on Sunday evening, and he went home sometime after midnight. While there, Taylor had been texting Terrell all night.
Taylor was calling incessantly throughout the night. Multiple text messages. And it was clear that she was very angry.
Although Jordan had seen Terrell before, he did not come back to his house.
In fact, he knows nothing about Terrell leaving a phone charger.
So now the detectives are trying to find out, was that just a lie that he told Taylor while walking out the door?
I'm going to get my charger from Jordan's. Relax.
The officer will show you out.
Hoping for more insight, the detective reaches out to Terrell's sisters.
Terrell and his sisters were very close. They really relied on each other throughout their upbringing.
However, they did mention that ever since he got out of jail, something seemed different. He seemed a little troubled.
They said that Taylor portrayed this like happy little family on her social media, and they just felt like something was off with them.
He was very distant. He wasn't his normal, jovial self.
At Thanksgiving, he just kept drinking and drinking. It didn't seem like him.
What the family says seems to add credence to Taylor's fears that Terrell might have just walked out on her.
But even as the detective is suspecting that's the case, it appears that Taylor may have changed her mind.
Christmas had come and gone, and nobody had heard from him.
Taylor posted on social media about Terrell's disappearance and organized a search.
She seemed exasperated that she couldn't find him and didn't know what happened to him.
Taylor isn't the only one losing patience.
His two sisters hadn't heard from him.
I started wondering why they wasn't pursuing. And when I found out in the state of South Carolina, if your loved one don't have a mental illness, they're gonna give time for your loved one to come back.
But Terrell's sister suspects he isn't coming back.
She believes that there's foul play involved.
My brother's not gonna throw away his freedom. You know, he just got home, and I don't see him cutting no ankle monitor up.
Because even if Terrell wanted to disappear out of Taylor's life, why would he not answer the phone calls of his sisters, his family, or his kids?
And then not only that, Terrell was always the type to let somebody know where he was at.
So where was Terrell? No one could figure out where this man was.
Me and my sister and everybody was looking for Terrell, trying to figure out where his last location was.
A possible answer comes late on the evening of December 28th, when a woman named Letitia walks into the police station.
How can I help you?
She says she knows what happened to Terrell.
And she knows who did it.
She killed him.
A woman named Letitia has come forward to the detective investigating Terrell Sims' disappearance, claiming she knows what happened to the 26-year-old aspiring rapper.
What's more is she claims to know who did it.
She dropped a bomb on us.
She explained that she's been friends with Taylor for a long time.
On the 20th, Letitia said Taylor came over with the man she refers to as Youngster.
I don't know his real name, but I'd seen him with her a few times before.
Taylor said she had something urgent to tell Letitia.
What's going on, girl?
You're not gonna believe what I've been through.
What's going on?
Taylor told her that Terrell had came home the night before and they got into a huge argument.
Where have you been? Chill out.
She thought he was cheating on her.
No, you weren't.
This did align with what Taylor told them.
But after that, the story starts to differ.
According to Letitia, Taylor said during the argument, Terrell hit her. And in response, she pulled out a gun and shot him 4 times.
You're making me pissed off right now. I'm over you. I'm over these kids. I'm over everything.
I just wanted him to stop.
She was not going to be a victim anymore. She was simply protecting herself from further violence.
Is he?
Yes.
She said that once she killed Terrell, she called up Youngster and asked him to come over and help her get rid of the body.
Youngster, I need your help.
According to Letitia, Youngster agreed to come over and help Taylor load Terrell's body into the back of her rental car.
They proceeded to drive him out into the country onto Monticello Road.
That's when Youngster cut the ankle monitor off of Terrell's leg.
And then they kept driving, looking for a place to dump the body.
She told me that they took him to some kind of an overlook or a bridge.
Taylor told Letitia that they tossed the body over.
They were expecting to hear a splash because they thought they were throwing him into a stream.
But according to Letitia, that wasn't what happened.
Splash in the water.
I thought you said...
Don't worry about it. Come on, let's go.
They didn't go down to check, and they just left him there.
She told me that's why they came to
Letitia says that is why they came to her apartment that day.
She wanted help moving his body because she didn't think she disposed of it properly.
She was blown away. Not only that Taylor had admitted this to her, but now she was at her house asking her to help her.
According to Letitia, she told Taylor no.
I'm sorry, but no.
She just didn't want anything to do with it.
Yes, she said.
And that's not all the information Letitia has for the detective.
According to what Taylor said, when she shot Terrell, one of the bullets missed. It went all the way through the wall of the house and hit the rental car outside.
And it hit the rental car.
It's such a wealth of detail about Terrell's disappearance that the detective is left wondering whether Letitia knows even more than she claims.
They really have no way of knowing whether or not Letitia is involved, if she is calculating this to clear her own name.
Following her interview, the detective starts checking with local car rental agencies.
They eventually found where Taylor had rented an SUV a week before Christmas, and she had recently returned it.
They're told that when it was returned, there was some body damage.
And where's that car now?
The rental company sent it to the body shop, apparently to repair a hole in the hood.
They located the vehicle, and lo and behold, there's a hole that Letitia described from a bullet in the hood of this vehicle.
The detective has the car towed to their lab, where they find more damning evidence.
They sprayed down the SUV's hatchback with luminol.
And what do you know? It glowed.
Detectives investigating the disappearance of Terrell Sims now believe they're investigating a homicide.
I have some information about Terrell.
First, the witness came forward claiming that Terrell's girlfriend, Taylor, confessed to killing him.
And now they've found a bullet hole and blood in the rental car that had been in Taylor's possession on the evening Terrell disappeared.
But is the blood Terrell's?
Samples from the SUV are sent off to the crime lab for testing while they continue building their case.
Detectives attempt to identify Taylor's alleged accomplice, a man their informant only knew as Youngster.
I ended up confirming his identity through his social media being connected with Taylor's.
Youngster turns out to be 30-year-old Eddie Brown.
And as Letitia said, he lives in the Colony Apartments.
But that's not all that Eddie and Taylor's social media reveals.
It appears that Taylor and Eddie are more than friends. As a reminder, Terrell spent almost a year in jail before Taylor bailed him out on those domestic violence charges.
And Taylor has a whole sexual relationship with Eddie.
Does that mean that Letitia has it right that Taylor killed Terrell and Eddie is actually the accomplice? Or if Eddie was hooking up with Taylor, is it possible that Eddie wanted Terrell out of the picture now that he's out?
Hoping to determine Eddie's role in the crime, the detective requests surveillance footage from the Colony Apartments.
They have an extensive camera system. And scrubbing through the videos, detectives find footage of Taylor's SUV.
They see Taylor driving into the colonies at 4:30 in the morning on the night that Terrell supposedly disappeared.
It catches Taylor exiting the SUV and headed towards Eddie's apartment. A few minutes later, Taylor and Eddie leave the apartment and get back in the SUV.
She leaves with her boyfriend, Eddie Brown.
Everything about this footage is explosive. And it's not lost on the detectives that when they spoke to Taylor, at no time did she ever mention leaving her house.
And while the videos aren't perfect, the damage on the SUV's hood is clearly visible. Then, some 4 hours later, the SUV arrives back at the Colony Apartments.
She drops him off like nothing ever happened.
But the detective has a pretty good idea of where they've been.
Terrell's ankle monitor had been dumped near Monticello Road. But they needed to confirm if Eddie and Taylor had been to that location.
Hoping to prove that was where they'd gone, the detective turns to the city's traffic cameras.
We actually saw Taylor driving her vehicle outbound Monticello Road.
The footage places Taylor there a little before 8 a.m.
Then within 20 minutes, she was driving back inbound, and that was after his ankle monitor got cut off.
Everything fits what Letitia told detectives.
Which means Terrell's body can't be far, but it will be difficult to locate.
Monticello Road is an excellent place to dump a body. It's sparsely populated and heavily wooded.
There's all kinds of little creeks and rivers. I mean, he could have been anywhere.
Luckily, the timestamps on the camera narrowed the search radius down.
Based on the speed the SUV was going and the window of time of when it passed and when it came back, detectives figured that Terrell's body is somewhere within a radius of about 10 minutes.
With that as their starting point, the search begins.
We were just checking every creek, every river, little dump spots.
They searched all day but had nothing to show for it.
There was a sense of frustration. There was a lot of trash, but no bodies.
But I wasn't going to call it quits without finding him.
Then, about 7 hours into the search, the detective stops on the bridge that crosses Shaver Creek.
I checked the side that had more water, and there wasn't anything there. And so I walked across to the other side, and when I looked down, I saw what looked like a body laying there in a trash bag. I was like, there is no way.
But a closer look left no doubt.
I could see his sock on his foot sticking out, and I knew that I found him.
One of the detectives searching for Terrell Sims believes she has found his body in a creek north of Columbia, South Carolina.
The location and settings are almost a perfect match for what Terrell's girlfriend Taylor supposedly told her friend Letitia.
I found him.
27, I've got both the victim and the suspect here.
When backup arrives, they're able to tentatively determine that the body is indeed Terrell.
His body was actually preserved pretty well.
It's him.
It was cold at that time of year, and he hadn't actually really been submerged in the water.
While the medical examiner's team removes the body for autopsy, the detective faces the grim task of notifying Terrell's family.
It was very heartbreaking. It was a lot going through my mind that day.
But there is some relief. This is like closure.
And it's the final piece of evidence investigators need to arrest Taylor.
They get the warrants together, and they arrest Taylor.
When the detectives sit down with her, she continues to act as if Terrell is just missing.
Oh, man. I hope when y'all find this man, he can't say nothing to me. I should have just stayed away from him, man.
When detectives let Taylor know that they found Terrell's body, she acts surprised.
That's why I'm here, because he's dead?
She wants them to believe that she had nothing to do with it.
But detectives inform her that they already got the whole story from Letitia.
I didn't confess to nobody. Bro, this is wicked. So I'm going to jail for something that I did not do.
No. You're going to jail for something you did do.
That's when she asked for an attorney.
So the conversation with Taylor comes to an abrupt stop.
But when the detectives bring in Eddie, he's more willing to talk.
He quickly decides, hey, I'm not going to go to jail for something I didn't commit.
Okay, look, I had nothing to do with this.
He begins confirming exactly Letitia's original story to the police.
Well, I wasn't even there when it happened.
He said that Terrell had assaulted Taylor, and she shot him in self-defense. And he helped her clean it up and dispose of the body. But he minimized his role.
And so he was charged with accessory after the fact.
The news of Taylor's involvement hits Terrell's family hard.
It was Very emotional. I was trying to keep it together for his kids and my sister.
But can investigators make the murder charges stick?
She described shooting him as being an act of self-defense.
Keep playing with me. You really want me to kill you?
Terrell is already out on bail for a prior domestic violence charge.
Which meant that there was a chance that Taylor could get off scot-free.
But once they conducted the autopsy of Terrell's body, it was clear that that was not the case.
He had been shot 5 or 6 times through his back. So he wasn't attacking her.
Ow.
He was trying to leave, and she couldn't handle that. This wasn't self-defense.
With this new information, it really questions the initial arrest that he had, where she says that he attempted to kill her and the baby, and he denied.
But it's Taylor's phone records that give police their best indication of Taylor's motive.
In the days leading up to Terrell's death, she had been texting him repeatedly, asking why he wasn't coming home, who he was with. Taylor appeared consumed with jealousy, despite having another boyfriend. And on the night of the murder, jealousy had boiled over into rage.
You could tell that she didn't feel like she was in control of the situation.
So when he finally did come home, detectives believed that Taylor was waiting, angry and ready.
Where were you?
While we don't know exactly what happened, it's apparent there was some sort of confrontation.
You are nuts. All right, stop.
And Taylor pulled out a gun and shot Terrell.
When she was faced with the possibility of him leaving, she made the decision that he would never leave again.
Even worse, Taylor shot Terrell while their children were in the house.
She just didn't care.
It didn't slow her down from her desire to control Terrell.
But would the jury agree? Prosecutors aren't sure.
Given Terrell's history, there just might be enough reasonable doubt to stand in the way of a conviction.
So in March 2024, they make a deal with Taylor.
She pleads guilty to voluntary manslaughter in exchange for a 20-year jail sentence.
I was upset. I mean, I ain't gonna lie. I wanted to fight her, but what would that solve?
I'm glad that it came to an end, but I wish that she was in prison for the rest of her life because she's a really evil person. Not once did she ever apologize or express any remorse.
Eddie's role in disposing of Terrell's body earns him 11 years in prison.
I do not believe justice was served in this case. 20 years and 11 years is not good enough for what they did.
All she had to do is say, well, Terrell, this ain't working. We can't be together no more.
And now 4 kids are going to be without their dad.
But if there's one thing the family and the authorities agree on, it's that Terrell didn't deserve what happened.
I'm not saying my brother was perfect, but still, how he left this world was wrong.
Here's Terrell, a young father, someone that just truly wanted a different life for himself and for his family, and his life is cut short.
If you see something ain't right in a relationship, or if somebody put their hands on you, don't stay, get out of it. You're worth more than that.
The Valley of Manoa sits like a lush green bowl in the heart of Honolulu, a place where the air is often thick with mist and the scent of rain on tropical foliage. It is a quiet, established neighborhood, far removed from the bustling tourist corridors of Waikiki or the transient energy of the island's commercial centers. People choose to live in Manoa for its profound sense of permanence and peace. The homes here are settled deeply into the landscape, surrounded by old-growth trees and manicured lawns, projecting an image of absolute domestic tranquility. It is the kind of place where generations of families grow up, where the ground beneath one's feet feels unshakable, safe, and entirely ordinary. But the Earth has a long memory, and it is uniquely capable of holding on to the darkest of human secrets until the precise moment someone decides to dig just a little too deep. On the morning of September 28, 2010, the serene atmosphere of an Oahu Avenue property in Manoa was interrupted by the heavy, rhythmic sounds of manual labor. A crew of construction workers had been hired to work on a residential home. Their task was arduous but routine, involving extensive excavation into the dirt directly beneath the footprint of the structure. Working in the cramped, damp space beneath a house is a claustrophobic endeavor. The air is stale, the light is poor, and the focus is entirely on moving earth, shifting dirt, and preparing the ground for structural reinforcement or utility installations. For the workers, it was just another Tuesday in paradise, a day measured in hours of labor and cubic yards of displaced soil. As the digging progressed into the deeper layers of the earth beneath the house, the rhythm of the work was abruptly broken. The tools struck something that did not behave like rock and did not yield like a root. In the dim light under the foundation, surrounded by the smell of overturned soil, the workers paused to examine the obstruction. Brushing away the damp earth, the shapes that emerged from the ground were unmistakable, instantly recognizable to the human eye no matter how out of context they might be. They were bones. The initial reaction in such situations is often a desperate grasp for a rational, non-threatening explanation. In a place with as deep and complex a history as Hawaii, the unearthing of skeletal remains is not entirely unprecedented. Construction projects are occasionally halted when ancient indigenous burial sites are disturbed. For a brief, hopeful moment, the workers might have believed they had stumbled upon an archaeological artifact, a quiet piece of ancient history that had simply rested there for centuries. But as more of the soil was carefully cleared away, the reality of the situation grew increasingly grim and definitively modern. The workers ceased their excavation immediately and retreated from the crawl space, leaving the remains exactly as they had found them in the dirt. The authorities were called, and the quiet, mist-shrouded street of Oahu Avenue was soon lined with the flashing lights of Honolulu Police Department cruisers. The transition was absolute and immediate. The site was no longer a domestic renovation project. It was a secure scene, cordoned off by bright yellow tape that fluttered incongruously against the lush tropical backdrop. The house above remained structurally intact, but its meaning had changed forever. It was now a monument resting atop a mystery. When forensic investigators and crime scene technicians arrived, they approached the space beneath the house with meticulous caution. The extraction of human remains from a confined, subterranean environment is a delicate process. Every ounce of dirt must be sifted, every position of every bone documented, because in the absence of a witness, the earth and the bones themselves are the only entities capable of telling the story of what happened. As the remains were carefully exhumed from their dark, hidden resting place and brought into the light of day, the investigators realized they were facing a profound enigma. There was no wallet found among the dirt. There was no identifying jewelry, no driver's license, no weathered scrap of paper to offer a name. The remains were completely devoid of any immediate, obvious identification. Furthermore, a preliminary check of local missing persons reports in the immediate area yielded no obvious matches. No local family was actively searching for a loved one who fit the vague profile of the bones pulled from the Manoa dirt. In the official records of the Honolulu Police Department, a new file was opened. The space for the victim's name was filled with the stark, anonymous placeholder used by American law enforcement for the unidentified, John Doe. If the discovery had ended there, it would have been a tragedy, a sad tale of a forgotten individual who somehow met their end beneath a residential home. But as the forensic experts from the medical examiner's office began their detailed analysis of the skeletal remains, the case took a sharp, sinister turn. This was not a drifter who had crawled beneath a house to escape the elements and passed away quietly in his sleep. This was not a natural death, nor was it a tragic, unforeseen accident. The bones bore the undeniable, violent signatures of extreme trauma. A close examination of the skull revealed a highly specific and fatal injury, a bullet hole. Someone had deliberately aimed a firearm at this man's head and pulled the trigger. The presence of the ballistic trauma instantly elevated the investigation. The police were no longer simply trying to identify a body. They were hunting a killer. The file was officially classified as a homicide. Yet, the bullet wound was only one part of the horrifying tableau written into the remains. According to the official investigative records of the Honolulu Police Department, careful analysis of the scene and the remains revealed another chilling detail. Before he was killed, the man had been bound. He had been tied up, physically restrained, and rendered completely helpless. This specific detail fundamentally shifted the psychological profile of the crime. A person who is bound before being shot is not the victim of a random mugging gone wrong. They are not the casualty of a sudden, explosive argument that tragically escalated into lethal violence. The act of restraining a human being requires time, physical dominance, and absolute intent. It suggests that the victim was held captive, controlled by one or perhaps multiple individuals who overpowered him. It implies a period of profound terror for the victim, knowing he was completely at the mercy of his captors. Local media outlets, upon catching wind of the brutal nature of the crime, would later describe the murder as an execution-style death. While the police maintained their objective, clinical terminology, confirming only the bindings and the fatal gunshot to the head, the media's grim characterization captured the undeniable reality of the physical evidence. This was a calculated, deliberate taking of a human life. The method of the murder was terrifying, but the method of disposal was equally disturbing and spoke volumes about the perpetrator's mindset. The killer or killers did not panic and dump the body in a remote forest, nor did they weigh it down and cast it into the deep waters of the Pacific Ocean. Instead, they chose a location that required significant effort and audacity. They dug a grave in the confined space beneath a residential structure in a populated neighborhood. This decision was not random. It was a deeply strategic choice designed for absolute permanence. By burying the body beneath a house, the perpetrators were relying on the structure above to act as an eternal, impenetrable seal. They banked on the likelihood that homeowners rarely, if ever, have reason to excavate deep beneath their own foundations. The house was essentially transformed into a massive, unwitting tombstone. The killers walked away from that Oahu Avenue property believing they had committed the perfect crime, confident that the earth would hold their secret forever, and that the man they had tied up and executed would never again see the light of day. And for many years, their dark assumption was completely correct. The residents of the house went about their daily lives, sleeping, eating, and living just feet above a gruesome crime scene, completely oblivious to the tragedy buried in the soil beneath them. If the homeowners had never decided to undertake that specific construction project on that specific day in September 2010, it is highly probable that the bones would have remained undisturbed until the house itself crumbled into dust. The victim would have remained entirely erased from the world. Instead, the blunt edge of a construction tool shattered the silence, bringing John Doe out of the darkness and into a forensic laboratory. The earth had finally surrendered its secret, presenting the Honolulu Police Department with an incredibly complex puzzle. They had the remains of a man who had been viciously overpowered, bound, shot in the head, and meticulously hidden. They had a crime scene that had been compromised by the passage of time and the weight of a house. But they had absolutely no idea who the man was, where he came from, or who could have possibly hated him enough to execute him and bury him in the quiet neighborhood of Manoa. The investigation was about to begin, but the path to the truth would prove to be as dark and tangled as the roots in the soil where John Doe had been forced to sleep. For over a decade, the man pulled from the earth beneath the Manoa house was defined entirely by his absolute absence. He was merely a collection of forensic measurements, a skeletal structure resting under harsh fluorescent lights on a cold metal examination table, a nameless void in a filing cabinet marked only with the stark designation of John Doe. In the deeply complex realm of unsolved homicides, an unidentified victim presents an almost insurmountable wall for law enforcement. Without a proper name, there is no personal history to trace, no potential enemies to interview, no financial records to subpoena, and no timeline to reconstruct. A nameless body is a tragic story completely severed from its beginning and its middle, leaving investigators with nothing but a violent and silent end to analyze. However, the relentless march of scientific advancement eventually pierces even the most stubborn shadows of the past. When the barrier of anonymity was finally broken through sophisticated DNA analysis, the wall crumbled completely, revealing a deeply complex human being whose life had been brutally cut short. The bones were no longer just a grim artifact of a seemingly perfect crime hidden in the tropical dirt. They belonged to a father, a former husband, a man with a distinct and active footprint on the world. His name was William Hans Holling Jr. Suddenly, the Honolulu Police Department was no longer investigating the murder of a phantom. They were looking at the intricate life and the terrifying final days of a 38-year-old man who had vanished entirely from the face of the earth nearly 4 decades prior. The restoration of his name was the most crucial paradigm shift in the entire investigation, transforming a stagnant and cold case into a vibrant, multi-layered puzzle spanning vast continents and decades of silence. William Hans Holling Jr. was a resident of the state of Washington, a region characterized by its dense evergreen forests, jagged mountain ranges, and persistent, misty rain. The geographical contrast between the place he called home and the place where his life was violently extinguished is stark and deeply unsettling. Washington State in the mid-1980s was a place of rugged individualism, a landscape that naturally fosters a certain kind of quiet resilience in its residents. Living there, William would have been deeply accustomed to the chill of the Pacific Northwest air, the heavy gray skies of the long winter months, and the sprawling distances between rural towns and urban centers. He was exactly 38 years old when the narrative of his life abruptly stopped, an age where most men are deeply entrenched in the architecture of their existence, building careers, navigating complex family dynamics, and solidifying their permanent place in the world. To be 38 is to be in the very middle of the human journey, making the sudden and violent cessation of his life all the more jarring to comprehend. He was not an elderly man fading naturally into the twilight of his years, nor was he a reckless youth tempting fate with dangerous behaviors. He was a mature adult in his absolute prime, entirely capable, autonomous, and anchored to the world by a web of relationships and daily responsibilities. The sudden extraction of a vibrant 38-year-old man from his established life leaves a massive, jagged hole in the social fabric around him, a void that his family would carry for the rest of their lives. The timeline of his complete erasure is anchored to a very specific and chilling window in time. According to the official police records released to the public, William was last seen alive by his family and friends in January of 1985. The winter months in Washington State are often harsh, dark, and isolating, a time when people naturally retreat indoors and social circles inherently tighten. Disappearing in the dead of winter adds a layer of profound desolation to the mystery of his fate. When a capable adult vanishes without a trace, the initial days are often clouded by extreme confusion and a desperate search for rational, non-violent explanations. Unlike a missing child, an adult has the absolute legal right to walk away from their life, to disconnect from society, or to seek solitude without informing anyone. Friends and family might initially assume he took a sudden unannounced trip, desperately needed personal space, or simply fell out of touch due to overwhelming personal struggles. The terrifying realization that an absence is not temporary, but rather permanent, is a slow and agonizing dawn for those left behind. As January turned into February, and the weeks bled endlessly into months, the total silence from William would have grown increasingly deafening and unnatural. There were no phone calls to check in, no letters arriving in the mail, no banking transactions to indicate he was still moving through the world. He had simply evaporated from the rainy landscape of Washington, leaving behind a profound and agonizing ambiguity that would haunt his loved ones for nearly 40 years. The cruelest paradox of a missing persons case is the total lack of finality it provides. It is a profound grief without a physical grave, a mourning process suspended indefinitely in a terrifying state of permanent hope and perpetual despair. To fully understand the potential vulnerability of William in January of 1985, one must carefully examine the emotional landscape he was navigating at the specific time of his disappearance. The Honolulu Police Department noted a highly significant detail about his personal life during this period, revealing that he was going through a remarkably bitter divorce. A highly contentious separation is widely recognized as one of the most psychologically and emotionally destabilizing events a human being can possibly endure. It completely fractures a person's reality, dismantling the very foundation of their daily existence, their financial stability, their social standing, and their overall sense of security in the world. A bitter divorce consumes enormous amounts of mental bandwidth and energy, leaving individuals exhausted, highly distracted, and often deeply isolated from their usual support systems. Friends sometimes feel forced to take sides, daily routines are utterly shattered, and the individual is left alone to navigate a chaotic and highly stressful life transition. From a purely investigative standpoint, this extreme personal turmoil is a crucial factor to consider. High stress and emotional exhaustion can frequently lead people to make uncharacteristic decisions, to seek out temporary escapes, or to significantly lower their usual defensive guard. Furthermore, a fractured social life means that abnormal behavior or sudden unexplainable absences might not be immediately flagged as dangerous by those around him. If William was deeply distracted by the grueling legal and emotional battles of a hostile domestic collapse, his sudden disappearance might have initially been misinterpreted by some observers as a drastic coping mechanism, a desperate and sudden attempt to flee the suffocating pressure of his ruined marriage. This chaotic emotional backdrop provided the perfect psychological camouflage for his killers, ensuring that his sudden silence would not immediately trigger a massive and coordinated law enforcement search effort. While his emotional life was firmly anchored in the domestic turbulence of Washington state, his physical life was characterized by vast and sweeping movements across the globe. William Hans Holling Jr. was absolutely not a man who stayed put in one location. He frequently traveled back and forth between the United States and Australia, a massive trans-Pacific journey that requires immense logistical coordination, financial resources, and physical endurance. In the mid-1980s, international air travel was significantly different than the streamlined process it is today. It was more cumbersome, less digitally connected, and carried a much stronger inherent sense of profound physical distance. Moving regularly between North America and the Australian continent suggests a life spread incredibly thin, perhaps driven by complex business interests, deep personal connections, or a restless desire to frequently escape the confines of his immediate surroundings in the Pacific Northwest. This frequent and demanding long-haul travel created a sprawling international footprint for him. It meant he was deeply comfortable navigating massive airports, dealing with customs, handling foreign currencies, and enduring long stretches of lonely transit. A man who regularly crosses the massive expanse of the Pacific Ocean is a man who knows exactly how to move through the world efficiently and confidently. But this constant global motion also made him highly vulnerable to vanishing. A frequent international traveler is often untethered from a strict daily routine at home, making it incredibly difficult for anyone back in Washington to know exactly where he was on any given specific day. If he missed a connecting flight, altered his travel itinerary on a whim, or encountered foul play abroad, the people waiting for him in Washington might not realize something was terribly wrong until many days or even weeks had silently passed. The crucial geographical bridge perfectly connecting his established life in Washington to his frequent destination in Australia was the isolated island of Oahu. Honolulu served as the vital and necessary transit hub, the unavoidable midpoint in his massive oceanic commutes. Every single time he crossed the Pacific, the Hawaiian Islands acted as a mandatory stepping stone. This seemingly simple logistical detail is the master key to unlocking the entire geographical mystery of the case. It perfectly explains why a man whose roots were firmly planted in the cold Pacific Northwest was ultimately found buried deeply beneath a residential house in the warm, tropical valley of Manoa. Honolulu was absolutely not a random vacation spot for William. It was a deeply ingrained and highly familiar part of his regular travel routine. He would have been intimately familiar with the layout of the Honolulu International Airport, the heavy, humid air hitting him as he stepped off the airplane, the tedious logistics of long layovers, and the general local geography of the city. But a travel layover is strictly supposed to be a temporary pause, a brief intersection of paths before continuing the overarching journey. For William, Honolulu tragically transformed from a temporary transit point into a permanent and highly fatal trap. Something specific, or someone specific, successfully intercepted him during one of these routine layovers. He did not simply stay safely at the airport waiting for his connecting flight to Sydney or Melbourne. He actively left the secure terminal, venturing out into the sprawling city, eventually finding himself miles away in the quiet, deeply residential streets of Manoa. The transition from a seasoned international traveler confidently navigating a busy airport to a helpless victim viciously bound and executed beneath a private family home represents a terrifying and steep descent into the dark underbelly of a tropical paradise. The serene, postcard-perfect image of Hawaii as a place of ultimate relaxation and breathtaking beauty stands in horrific and permanent contrast to the brutal, highly calculated violence that violently ended his life in the dark dirt of Oahu Avenue. When the earth yielded its grim secret beneath the foundation of that Manoa residence, it offered investigators a fragmented time capsule preserved in the dark soil. The forensic analysis of a crime scene where the body has rested undisturbed for decades is a process of reverse engineering reality from fibers. Amidst the dirt and bone, investigators discovered the remnants of the victim's final moments etched into the decaying fabric of his clothing. William Hans Holling Jr. was found wearing a blue short-sleeved shirt and brown trousers. To the untrained eye, these items are nothing more than completely ruined and tattered rags. To a trained forensic investigator, however, they are absolutely critical temporal anchors. The trousers were identified as Levi Panatella pants, a brand carrying manufacturing history. By tracing the production lineage of these garments, investigators established a hard chronological boundary. Based on the manufacturing dates, experts definitively concluded that the victim could not have died prior to the year 1982. This material evidence served as a solid pillar in building the timeline of his murder. When this forensic timeline was cross-referenced with the missing persons report from Washington State, the pieces locked together with chilling precision. William vanished in January of 1985. The clothes he wore into the grave were manufactured no earlier than 1982. This flawless alignment between the physical evidence and the biographical data eliminated any lingering doubts about the sequence of events. He did not die decades earlier, and he did not live long in the shadows after his disappearance. His life was violently interrupted precisely during that cold winter window in 1985, freezing him in the garments of that era forever. Beyond the fragile threads of his clothing, the skeletal remains narrated a story of calculated devastation. The medical examiner's laboratory is a place devoid of sentiment, where the human body is reduced to a landscape of trauma that must be mapped. As the forensic anthropologist examined the skull of William Hans Holling Jr., the defining cause of his death was immediately apparent. There was a distinct, unmistakable bullet hole piercing the cranium. A gunshot wound to the head in the context of a hidden body completely eradicates any preliminary theories of misadventure, natural causes, or accidental tragedy. It speaks to a singular, lethal intent. The perpetrator did not merely intend to harm William. The perpetrator intended to instantly extinguish his consciousness. The trajectory of such a wound suggests close proximity, a moment where the killer stood beside the victim and made the conscious, irreversible decision to pull the trigger. This was not a chaotic fight that tragically escalated out of control, Nor was it a robbery where an assailant fired blindly. A single bullet to the head, combined with the elaborate concealment of the body, represents a level of cold calculation that sends a chill through seasoned homicide detectives. It indicates a scenario where the victim was entirely at the mercy of someone who had already decided his fate, reducing William from a living father into a problem that needed to be violently erased from existence. However, the bullet hole, as horrific as it is, merely marks the final fraction of a second of William's life. The most psychologically disturbing detail uncovered by the Honolulu Police Department lies in what happened immediately before the gunshot echoed through the space. According to official investigative files, forensic evidence conclusively demonstrated that William had been bound before he was killed. This single, terrifying detail fundamentally alters the emotional and physical landscape of the crime. To bind a grown man requires a significant degree of physical domination, coercion, or the overwhelming advantage of numbers. It implies that William was subdued, restrained, and systematically stripped of his autonomy. The presence of bindings introduces a profoundly dark temporal element to the murder. It means this was not an instantaneous ambush. There was a duration of captivity, a period of agonizing time where William was completely aware of his helplessness and impending doom. He was forced to experience the profound terror of being held against his will, feeling the rough constraints, and looking into the eyes of those who had absolute control over his survival. This period of restraint speaks volumes about the psychology of the killers. They required him to be completely immobilized, perhaps to interrogate him, or simply to ensure there would be absolutely no struggle when they administered the fatal blow. The bindings transform the crime from a sudden act of violence into a prolonged nightmare of subjugation and absolute fear. When details of such a brutal nature seep into the public consciousness, the local media often scrambles to find evocative language to describe the horror. News outlets covering the gruesome discovery in Manoa quickly latched onto the phrase execution-style death to communicate the severity of the crime. This terminology is designed to evoke images of cold-blooded assassinations or calculated violence. It paints a picture of a victim forced to his knees, waiting for a predetermined end. While the media's dramatic characterization captures the visceral terror of the situation, the official records of the Honolulu Police Department maintain a strictly clinical distance. Investigators do not rely on cinematic phrasing, they rely on undeniable physical facts. The police confirmed only that the victim was bound and died from a gunshot wound to the head. Yet, even stripping away the sensationalized language of the press, the raw facts presented by law enforcement arrive at the exact same terrifying conclusion. The mechanics of tying a man up and shooting him in the skull inherently constitute an execution. It reveals an organized approach to murder, suggesting the involvement of individuals who were not driven by sudden rage, but rather by a chillingly pragmatic mission to end a life and dispose of the evidence. The disparity between the media's dramatic narrative and the police's clinical restraint highlights the profound darkness of the act itself. It is a crime so inherently brutal that it requires absolutely no embellishment to convey its true horror. The mechanics of the murder inevitably lead to the incredibly complex logistics of the disposal, a phase of the crime that raises perplexing questions about the perpetrator's capabilities. After the fatal shot was fired, the killers were left with the heavy, uncooperative weight of a deceased adult male. Transporting and burying a body is a physically exhausting and risky endeavor. To choose the confined, subterranean space beneath a residential house in Manoa as the burial site defies conventional criminal logic. Digging a grave in the tight, claustrophobic crawlspace of a home is not something that can be accomplished quickly or quietly. It requires shovels, intense manual labor, and hours of uninterrupted time in the dark earth. The killers would have had to move massive amounts of dirt while hunched over in a restricted space, all while avoiding the detection of neighbors in an established community. This logistical nightmare strongly suggests that the perpetrators had secure, unfettered access to that specific Oahu Avenue property. They were not trespassers frantically hiding a body in the closest available dark corner. They were individuals who possessed the keys, the time, and the absolute confidence that they would not be interrupted during the grueling process of excavation. It raises the terrifying specter that the house itself might have been the primary scene of the crime, a place where William was lured, restrained, executed, and immediately pushed into the dirt beneath the floorboards. The decision to entomb William beneath a family home transcends mere logistical convenience. It reveals a deeply chilling psychological arrogance on the part of the killers. By burying their victim beneath the foundation of a permanent residential structure, they effectively weaponized the concept of domestic tranquility. They understood that a house represents safety, continuity, and an untouched sanctuary for the families who live there. People do not routinely tear up the foundations of their own homes. The killers relied on this fundamental social norm to act as the ultimate, impenetrable shield for their crime. They transformed a space meant for living into a silent, hidden mausoleum. There is a profound and sickening dissonance between the violent reality of William's final moments and the decades of mundane domestic life that carried on directly above his decaying remains. Above the ground, families ate dinners, children played in the living room, and residents slept soundly, completely oblivious to the fact that they were resting just feet above the bound and executed corpse of a missing father from Washington. The killers walked away from that house in 1985 secure in the belief that they had successfully erased William Hans Holling Jr. from the universe. They believed the earth and the architecture would keep their brutal secret forever. For 25 years, their dark calculation was flawlessly correct until the random, heavy swing of a construction worker's steel tool suddenly pierced the dense earthen veil, violently forcing the quiet residential house to permanently surrender the gruesome, hidden horror it had been unwittingly guarding for so many long, incredibly silent, and completely undisturbed decades. When the remains were carefully extracted from the Manoa dirt, they were transported from the chaos of the active crime scene to the highly sterile, intensely focused environment of a forensic laboratory. The Honolulu Police Department enlisted the expertise of specialists from the Joint POW-MIA Accounting Command, an organization with profound experience in identifying human remains recovered from complex and compromised environments. In the quiet isolation of the examination room, the muddy, fragmented bones were meticulously cleaned, laid out, and assembled upon a metal table. This process is essentially an attempt to read the autobiography that every human being leaves behind in their skeletal structure. Forensic anthropologists do not see just a collection of bones. They see a detailed map of a person's physical existence. By examining the density of the femurs, the fusion of the cranial sutures, and the specific angles of the pelvis, these experts can calculate the foundational metrics of a human life. Through this painstaking anatomical analysis, the scientists at the command were able to establish the primary physical parameters of the victim. They concluded that the man resting on their table was a Caucasian male. Based on the degenerative markers in the joints and the specific fusion of the bones, they estimated his age at the time of death to be somewhere between 40 and 57 years old. By measuring the length of the major long bones, particularly the femur and the tibia, they calculated his living height to have been between 1.68 meters and 1.88 meters. These measurements were crucial first steps, transforming an amorphous pile of remains into the faint outline of a specific individual. However, while this scientific analysis was deeply impressive and absolutely necessary, it was also frustratingly broad. The parameters provided by the forensic anthropologists cast a very wide net. A Caucasian male standing anywhere from 5'6" to 6'2", aged between 40 and 57, describes a massive demographic of the American population. These figures were vital data points, but they were not a name. They could not point investigators toward a specific missing persons report with absolute certainty. The police had a physical framework, but they lacked the defining characteristics that make a person recognizable to those who loved them. The bones could tell the experts how tall the man was and roughly how many years he had walked the earth, but they could not reveal the color of his eyes, the shape of his smile, or the specific contours of his face. To bridge the massive gap between raw osteological data and human recognition, The investigation needed to move from the realm of pure anatomical science into the delicate intersection of forensic art and human psychology. Recognizing that numbers and measurements would never trigger a memory from the public, the Honolulu Police Department turned to a forensic artist. This specialist was tasked with an incredibly daunting objective: to look at the cold, empty eye sockets of a fractured skull and somehow rebuild the living face that once looked out through them. The process of facial reconstruction is a meticulous blend of anatomical knowledge and artistic intuition. The artist analyzes the underlying bone structure, using established tissue depth markers to estimate how the muscles, fat, and skin would have draped across the skull in life. Because the investigators had absolutely no idea what the victim actually looked like in 1985, the artist had to account for vast variables in personal grooming. Multiple different versions of the reconstructed face were carefully generated. One version might show the man with neatly trimmed hair and a clean-shaven jawline, perhaps reflecting a conservative businessman. Another version might add a thick beard and longer, unkempt hair, acknowledging the possibility that he was a transient or someone who embraced a more relaxed lifestyle. These varied sketches were not just artistic exercises, they were desperate, calculated attempts to cast the widest psychological net possible, hoping that just one specific combination of hairline and jaw shape would suddenly resonate with someone, somewhere, who was missing a father, a brother, or a friend. Once these reconstructed images were finalized, they were broadcast to the public. The face of the Manoa John Doe, drawn from the architecture of a murdered skull, stared out from local television screens, newspapers, and police bulletins. The investigators waited with bated breath for the phone lines to light up. They waited for a panicked relative to call the precinct, weeping with recognition. They waited for a former coworker to point at the sketch and offer a name. But the response was completely and utterly agonizing. The phone lines remained silent. Not a single relative stepped forward. Not a single friend from the islands recognized the face. Nobody provided any actionable information that could bring the police even 1 inch closer to identifying the man. The absolute lack of response highlighted one of the most significant and paralyzing hurdles in the investigation: the distinct possibility that the victim was never a resident of Hawaii. Local missing person databases were completely useless if the man had simply vanished while passing through the state. If his family lived thousands of miles away on the mainland or across the ocean in another country, they would never see the sketches broadcast on Honolulu local news. The geographical isolation of the Hawaiian Islands, usually a source of beauty and peace, became a massive, impenetrable fortress guarding the victim's true identity. The investigation slowly ground to a devastating halt, and the files were eventually moved into the cold case archives, leaving John Doe to wait in the silent, sterile darkness of an evidence room. For more than a decade, the remains sat in quiet storage. From 2010 until the early 2020s, the physical evidence of the horrific crime remained completely unchanged. However, while the bones gathered dust in a secure facility, the world of forensic science outside those walls was undergoing a radical and unprecedented revolution. The technology surrounding the extraction and analysis of DNA was advancing at a staggering, exponential rate. In the past, extracting usable DNA from bones that had been buried in damp, acidic soil for decades was considered nearly impossible. The genetic material would simply degrade into useless fragments. But a new era of genetic genealogy and advanced extraction techniques began to emerge. Scientists developed revolutionary methods to isolate microscopic, heavily degraded fragments of DNA from rootless teeth and weathered bone, amplifying them into complete genetic profiles. The Honolulu Police Department, refusing to let the Manoa case completely fade into oblivion, recognized that this rapidly evolving technology represented their absolute best and perhaps only chance to finally break the deadlock. In the year 2023, a monumental breakthrough finally shattered the decades of silence. Utilizing the most advanced forensic technology available, scientists were remarkably able to extract a viable, comprehensive DNA profile directly from the skeletal remains recovered from the Oahu Avenue property. This was a stunning scientific triumph over the destructive forces of time and decay. With a complete genetic profile now in hand, the investigators were no longer forced to rely on the subjective interpretation of facial sketches or the geographic limitations of local missing person databases. They possessed the fundamental biological blueprint of the victim. This profile was immediately uploaded and compared against vast, interconnected genetic databases. Forensic genealogy does not merely look for a direct match. It searches for overlapping sequences of DNA that indicate familial relationships, tracing genetic lineages across generations and vast geographical distances. The digital search algorithms bypass the island of Oahu entirely, reaching across the Pacific Ocean and sweeping through the vast expanse of the continental United States. The microscopic threads of genetic code pulled from the dark Manoa dirt eventually locked onto a matching sequence located thousands of miles away, firmly rooted in the rainy, evergreen landscape of Washington state. The genetic algorithms had successfully located a direct familial link, a biological son living in Washington who had spent his entire life wondering why his father had suddenly vanished in the winter of 1985. Armed with this incredibly promising lead, law enforcement officers reached out to the son. It is a profoundly heavy burden to knock on a door and ask a man for a sample of his DNA to confirm if the bones found buried under a house in Hawaii belonged to his long-lost father. The son, seeking the truth that had evaded his family for nearly 40 years, fully cooperated with the authorities and provided a reference DNA swab. The laboratory scientists carefully placed the son's genetic material next to the profile extracted from the Manoa remains. The analysis was conducted, the sequences were compared, and the final results were absolute, scientifically irrefutable, and deeply profound. The DNA matched perfectly. The silent, faceless bones resting in the Honolulu evidence locker were definitively, legally, and biologically identified. After enduring nearly 14 agonizing years designated simply as a John Doe, and almost 40 years after he was last seen alive, the man finally had his identity fully restored. The grim placeholder was struck from the official police records forever, replaced by his true and rightful name, William Hans Holling, Jr. The most agonizing and seemingly impossible phase of the investigation had been conquered through the sheer power of modern science, closing a massive chapter of anonymity and finally allowing a murdered man to speak his own name from beyond the grave. The moment a name is restored to an unidentified body, there is a collective exhalation of breath, a fleeting sense of victory within the cold, sterile walls of a police precinct. However, in the complex, unforgiving architecture of a homicide investigation, the genetic identification of the victim is merely the establishment of the foundation. The miraculous DNA confirmation of William Hans Holling Jr. answered the most persistent, agonizing question that had haunted the Manoa discovery for 14 long years, yet it simultaneously opened a terrifying new chasm of inquiry. The public often conflates identification with resolution, mistakenly believing that giving a victim their name back equates to solving the crime and bringing the story to a neat conclusion. But the harsh, unyielding reality of the criminal justice system dictates that knowing who is lying on the autopsy table does absolutely nothing to reveal the identity of the person who violently put them there. The genetic breakthrough was a monumental, unprecedented triumph for forensic genealogy and a testament to human perseverance, but it was absolutely not a conviction. It did not miraculously produce a set of bloody fingerprints matching a known offender, nor did it spontaneously generate a tearful confession from a guilty conscience. Instead, it brutally and starkly illuminated the massive, echoing void where justice was supposed to be. In a standard narrative of a successfully solved murder, the identification of the victim swiftly leads to a viable suspect, followed by a dramatic arrest, and eventually culminating in the highly structured, formal theater of a courtroom trial. There is a judge solemnly presiding over the facts, a jury of peers carefully weighing the evidence, and a perpetrator forced to physically face the immense, crushing weight of their actions under the harsh fluorescent lights of the legal system. There are opening statements detailing the malicious motive, aggressive cross-examinations, picking apart fragile alibis, and the final, resounding strike of a heavy wooden gavel delivering a verdict that restores a fleeting sense of moral balance to the universe. But for the tragic case of William Hans Holling Jr., there is absolutely no courtroom. There is no nervous defendant sitting silently at the defense table, desperately avoiding the tearful gaze of the grieving family members. There are no impassioned closing arguments echoing through a quiet hall, and there is absolutely no judicial closure to be found. The trial of this particular murder exists only in the theoretical realm, a phantom proceeding where the dedicated prosecutors possess a named victim, a horrific cause of death, and a meticulously documented